Good morning, good afternoon, or whatever time it is that you're listening. Welcome to ambulatory-based monoclonal antibody therapy. My name is Wendy Wall. I am the director of SLMC Cancer Services and the Ambulatory Infusion Clinic. The Ambulatory Infusion Clinic has had the privilege of being on the front lines battling our COVID pandemic. And I've thrown up some pictures of some of the team, but let me tell you, it's been a whole team and a pleasure to watch this team, rise to the challenge and really step up and make a difference in this community. So we had a problem. We had COVID, and honestly, no specific treatment existed. And so it was sort of a wait and see approach. If you got it, you got it. And we were trying to manage the results all over the country and really all over the world. So everyone remembers the emphasis was all about prevention, right? About how we could contain it, wear our masks, wash our hands, social distancing, isolation, quarantine. But there really weren't effective therapeutics. And so if you were diagnosed, many people then battled for their lives. So in late 2020, several drugs were authorized by the FDA for emergency use. And when you see EUA in this presentation, it means emergency use authorization. So Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson all released vaccines to again contain COVID-19. But then additionally, and really with a lot less fanfare, the monoclonal antibodies, or mAbs, came to the scene, and they received an emergency use authorization to treat high-risk patients testing positive for COVID. And later then in 2021, there was another EUA that allowed us to use these mAbs in a prophylactic post-exposure situation. So let's talk. What is mAb? mAb stands for monoclonal antibody. And essentially, we've been using monoclonal antibodies both at AIC and at the Cancer Center and in the world for a long time. And we use these monoclonal antibodies essentially to stimulate the immune system to kick in and help you fight a disease. So in this particular case, we had these laboratory produced monoclonal antibodies that found something on that COVID-19 virus, a spike protein, and targeted it. By targeting that spike protein, these antibodies interfered with that virus's ability to get in there, and they gave the immune system a better chance of building a response and making whatever response to the disease that you might have less. So mAb essentially reduced the viral load, lessened symptom severity, and prevented hospitalizations up to 70%. So that was pretty significant. Now, we had very specific criteria on who was eligible for mAb. And you had to be high risk. I'm going to talk about what high risk means here in just a minute. You also had to have a positive COVID-19 test, have mild to moderate symptoms. So you couldn't be severe in your symptoms. Otherwise, the disease had already a high viral load. And so getting the monoclonal antibody didn't help you to wage that response. You shouldn't be admitted then, of course, and you needed to be 12 years of age or older. And then, like I mentioned earlier, in September 21, we had the post-exposure prophylaxis monoclonal antibodies, and those were authorized for those who have been exposed to COVID-19 and who were at high risk. I'm going to talk about it. But they were high risk for developing severe COVID and 12 years of age or older, and not fully vaccinated or vaccinated but had some sort of immunocompromised condition that made their body less likely to wage a response. So what are these high risk factors that I keep alluding to? Well, 65 or older. So just the fact that you're a little older made you at a little bit more high risk for developing severe disease or being admitted to the hospital. Also overweight, and that's a body mass index of over 25. Pregnancy, chronic kidney disease, diabetes. We already mentioned that weakened immune system. You can have a weakened immune system because you're getting chemotherapy or because you have some kind of other autoimmune disease that you might be battling. Cardiovascular disease, hypertension, chronic lung disease, sickle cell disease, neurodevelopment disorders, and medical-related technological dependence. That's a long list. And to be quite honest with you, when you were diagnosed with COVID, many of the patients in our community qualified to receive the monoclonal antibody for one reason or another. So first of all, a little bit of science. Does it work? The answer is absolutely yes. And I already mentioned that monoclonal antibody was found to reduce the severity of symptoms and hospitalization up to 70%. And you can see in these graphs that they did some work looking at a placebo, and placebo would mean you think you're taking the drug, but you're getting not the drug, and RegionCove, which is the drug that we're currently using right now. There were several MAB cocktails that have been released and still work. But you can see in this first graph that the viral load over time with the placebo was always higher and lasted longer than with RegionCove. And we display that in a couple of different ways in this graph. And you can see every time the viral load, the duration of the time, the peaks were always better when you receive the monoclonal antibody. So a lot of work happened by the SOMC teams, and this might be a time for me to give a shout out to Laura Ramey because she was our internal pharmacy expert on monoclonal antibodies, and she, because of the complications, not complications, but the complexity of the orders, how to receive the orders, what the providers needed to put on the order was tremendous. We had several iterations of the jet form. We had to include all those things like those high risk factors. What happened? Where were you? What did you weigh? What was your date of symptom onset? And then the actual order set for the RegionCove could be delivered in more than one way. We could deliver it in an infusion, or we could deliver it in 4 subcutaneous injections. No matter what, after we delivered the monoclonal antibody, we needed to monitor the patient for 1 hour afterwards to ensure that they tolerated it, that they weren't going to have an anaphylactic reaction. And so the order form was extremely complex and changed many times, but we really, toward the end, had a great order set that included all the information and worked. So we had the order set, right? And then I already mentioned that one of the important things was getting the patient the treatment as soon as possible so that they could wage a response to stop them from getting a more severe illness. And so I have to give a large shout out to the Medical Care Foundation leadership team. I think they were huddling one morning, and someone said, you know, why don't we generate an order for the monoclonal antibody at the time that the patient presents for the COVID test, and when the COVID test is positive, when or if, then we will send the order to AIC. That alone reduced the days. So you can imagine we're doing all these COVID tests. we're waiting 2 to 3 days for the response. And sorry, we must have some kind of thing going on here. So that's the 356-5000. So my phone and my cell phone are ringing at the same time. I apologize. But what the care center and the medical care foundation leaders did was reduce that amount of time by making sure that an order was already created by a provider, that there were discussions that happened with the patient, that if they were positive, that they would get a call. So the care center then, when the patient was positive, called the patient and executed on that order. And then AIC scheduled the patient. So that took about 3 days of wait time out of that scope of time so that we could get those antibodies to the patient sooner. We developed discharge instructions. We wanted the patient to understand what they were getting, what to do if they recognized that they were having symptoms, that they had questions, that they what they should do about receiving the COVID vaccine. If they decided to receive it, they shouldn't receive it for 90 days after receiving the monoclonal antibody. And I really just included this to mention that it's so important not to, there's so much more that goes into developing something like delivering these monoclonal antibodies than just delivering the medicine, right? It's all about getting the order right, getting the order components right, talking about how you get the order, making sure that you close the loop with discharge instructions and other types of things. So there's so many things in the process that I think the average person doesn't understand what was going on behind the scenes to make this all happen efficiently, and make sure that our patients were informed and taken care of in the way that we all expect. Another thing, talking about keeping the patients informed. So the ambulatory infusion clinic is located within the Raritan building and shares space with wound care. And the ambulatory infusion clinic already existed. So that team took care of immunocompromised patients. They deliver blood to patients. A lot of things that, and essentially we're already an 8 to 8, 7-day-a-week operation. So turning this unit essentially into a monoclonal antibody treatment unit was difficult. And I already showed pictures of the AIC team in their garbed up, gowned up, protective apparel. But you can imagine that that was very scary for the team and for patients that were well, patients that were immunocompromised. And so it took a lot of work with the wound care team and with the AIC team, and a lot of scripting with our patients to help them understand what is an exposure, how we're keeping you safe, and lots of those kinds of things. So challenges of MAB infusion, logistically, time scheduling following the PCP and order and referral was a challenge. We had to do a telephone intake on all of these patients, explain to them about what they needed to do when they arrived. We kept them in the parking lot. We wanted them to enter into the back entrance, again, to reduce exposure and to limit traffic. And the AIC is in the Raritan building, so there's not a pharmacy inside AIC. So behind the scenes for every order was a pharmacy order in which that had to be profiled, mixed, brought over, delivered to AIC. So when our volumes were high, you can imagine the collaboration and cooperation between pharmacy and courier services and the telephone calls. Okay, we got another one. All of the PPE that we needed, one-on-one, and actually it was one-on-one nursing care with the patient. So we had one nurse that was all gowned up and garbed up and doing the actual face-to-face patient care. And then we had another nurse who was actually doing all of the documentation, recording, doing all of the assessments and those kinds of things, because the on and off of the PPE at that time, it wasn't efficient to do that. So, and then we had the collaboration of terminally cleaning by environmental services between patients, allowing for proper air exchange, cleaning solution. Remember, we might be loading that room with an immunocompromised patient that was scheduled at AIC. So it took us approximately 2.5 to 3 hours per patient. Additional challenges were staffing. This critical mission that AIC took on taxed and really continues to tax our AIC resources. We were staffed to handle an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7-day operation for a volume that already existed. And adding this existing volume was certainly a challenge. And, you know, there really weren't additional staff members that were able to rise to the challenge and help us, and they wanted to. So many people said, what can I do? How can I help? And so many people did. So, but we didn't have nursing resources at our fingertips to be able to move an AIC clinic or set up a monoclonal antibody clinic in a separate space or location than where we were. So space was available, but dividing our staffing resources for the patients that already needed to be taken care of, plus the additional COVID patients, was definitely a challenge. And then we thought we had that all worked out, lots of work. And then all of a sudden our supply just went in the tank in the middle of the surge. So during the middle of the surge, demand actually outpaced the amount of drug that we had. And luckily, the NIH gave us some criteria through which we could prioritize which patients needed the medication the most. And so this slide is a representation of that prioritization. And we essentially held our post-exposure prophylaxis, and we were able to deliver to those who wanted to receive the MAB in a tier 2 category. Tier 2 was unvaccinated or unlikely to wage a response. We were also able to do some tier 3 in which they met the risk factors, and we did do a few PEP patients. So we're very proud of the way that we tiered, the way that we took care of patients, and the way that we communicated with Justin Clark, who was on an Ohio team, Rory Phillips in the pharmacy, Dr. Porter, Dr. Byers, Laura Ramey. We had a super team that was helping to, decide how and where and which patients was it most important to receive the monoclonal antibody. I can't say enough here, though, about the charge nurse at AIC. They really had to change on a daily basis. Hey, are we delivering tier 1? Hey, are we delivering tier 2? Oh, we're down to tier 3 today. And that was really hard for them to manage. And they were the ones that really had to script and talk to patients about this and explain about drug supply, explain about the importance of coming to their appointment, offering the opportunity. And this team changed on a dime on a daily basis. This graph is just a representation of what the MABs that we actually completed and did, and it definitely shows the surge. So you can see in August of 2021, our MAB administration was 1 to 5 and quickly went up. And I believe our surge, we did 33 or 34 in one day. That's a lot of patients, when you think about that 2.5 to 3 hour window that I gave with a very small room allocation, there was so much work. Again, I know I keep saying it, but I cannot stress it enough. The team collaboration with Kathy Davis and the whole team in terms of which rooms would we use for COVID patients, which rooms would we use for the routine patients, which, what are our allocations today? Can't say enough about maintenance, biomed, even some of our community partners who installed more wall outlets literally within a day, got us vital sign monitors that would automatically upload the results to Meditech. So many stories in helping the team to be able to do this work, and then stories about the team that actually did the work. So couldn't be prouder. There they are again, AIC in action. And so if you see any of this AIC team, please give them a shout out, thank them. We'll probably never know the extent of what we may have prevented in terms of hospitalizations and mortality related to COVID-19. What are the takeaways? MAB therapy is not a substitute for vaccination. Vaccination is absolutely the best way we currently have to battle the pandemic. MAB therapy does reduce the viral load, symptom severity, and hospitalizations. MAB is most effective the earlier it is employed. MAB can protect an individual from developing symptomatic COVID, and we talked about that with the post-exposure prophylactic EUA. And infusion clinics like AIC all over the world are playing a very important role in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's a few resources that you can learn more. And I hope that you took away from this many things, but I hope the largest thing is what a team can do when you put a team together. And we certainly couldn't be prouder of what we've done. Thank you for your time and attention.